Welcome to Standard Deviation.
Hello, Ciara.
Hey, Kevin.
How's it going over there?
Pretty good. How's it going over there?
It's okay over here. We're just, just getting by.
Getting by.
Just trying to get by, just like everybody else. I'm a little tired today.
Yeah.
My brain is foggy.
That's all right.
Is it?
Well, I mean, I feel like all the times that you say, like, oh, I wasn't really sharp on that podcast, or I was so tired, and you sound fine to me.
It's a political technique. I'm trying to set the bar low.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
This is going to be a shit episode, guys.
This is going to be terrible.
Just skip it.
This is always a terrible show, but now it's going to be especially bad.
For those people just listening, Kevin just winked at the camera.
Yeah. Which it kind of ruins it. So really, if you couldn't see it, just pretend we didn't tell you it happened. Anyway, I'm so bad at doing talk. Setting that bar lower and lower. What were we going to say?
Well, I was just noticing that as far as YouTube versus our just listeners go, it seems like we have almost as many YouTube views as we do listener views, according to Libsyn.
Well, that's cool. Hopefully they're not the same people. That would be weird.
That would be weird. That just means we have a bunch of, like, super fans.
Yeah.
They just listen to it, and they got to say it.
They got to see it, yeah. Yeah, it's pretty rare that I both watch and listen to the same podcast episode.
Yeah, the only time I sort of do that is with Joe Rogan, because sometimes they're looking at something. Like Jamie will pull up something on the internet, and they're like looking at it and commenting on it, and that's the only time I'm like, oh, fuck, and then I have to go like search for that one section on YouTube.
Yeah, I used to watch those the Joe Rogan episodes a lot until they changed studios, and I don't like looking at the new studio so much.
Yeah, you really hate it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't hate it. Contrasted though with the last
You're just
studio,
disappointed with
it's pretty awful. Yeah, I just the big thing. Well, first of all, the background curtain color I preferred red. I thought that looked better on camera versus purple for the guest side.
Yeah, and
then on the Joe Rogan side, he used to have cool colored mood lighting and brick walls and black and white mugshots of famous people. And now he has a drab American flag carved from wood that blends in with the wall, and
that really is the worst part. I don't mind the curtains; like, I don't care if they're red or purple; it looks fine. But I agree, the American flag is weird. It makes him look like a conservative talk show host.
Yeah,
and he already gets criticized for being alt-right, even though he's a liberal. So
and
it's like, do you really want
to? Yeah, I mean, I don't mind as much the connotation. It is a little maybe out of place. But really just the aesthetic of it, it's just like there's no contrast, just kind of it's a big brown smear, the whole background. So it's just ugly to look at.
It sounds like his whole studio sounds pretty badass.
So Joe, if you're listening,
he's not listening.
Do something about that, all right? Then I'll resume watching your podcast episodes. I know he keeps an eye on the analytics. He's like, oh shit, somebody stopped watching.
Unsubscribed.
It was me, buddy. Yeah, the rest of his studio is really cool. Have you seen it?
No, when I was on the older one.
Yeah.
And the older one, it was cool. It was, you walked in and there was like a waiting room, and that's where the wolf was, his like werewolf. He has this weird stuffed werewolf. I don't know where he got it from. This was probably a gift. He gets lots of gifts. And that's pretty much it. It just feels like a waiting room with this weird werewolf in it. And then you go into the actual studio, and it's kind of what you could see it on YouTube. It's just a small studio room that's soundproof, and there's just a bunch of shit on the table. It's more like gifts he's gotten. So it's kind of fun just to look at all the stuff he has. But yeah, it's just that it was anyways. It was a waiting room and a studio room, and now apparently he just bought out this huge spot with like archery field or whatever.
Yeah, I've seen videos of it. Yeah, I think it was
the right
built
word, archery field.
No, it's a range, like
a range, archery range.
It's a video game archery range. So like you shoot
it's not real.
Arrows. No, I mean he might have a real one too somewhere. Apparently it's a huge compound, but the one I saw, you shoot these arrows with like padded tips into a screen. So it's like a video game version with like real arrows, but not real deer and stuff.
Yeah, I'd say his old studio was like a man cave, and this new one sounds like a man playground.
Yeah, and he's got a full gym too, like a full...
And a float tank, and
just
all the things he likes.
Yeah, that's... it must be nice being rich. just like, you know what, I'm just gonna build a badass compound to record podcasts in.
Yeah,
I'm kind of surprised it took so long. Really, once I saw it, I was like, well, shit, yeah, I should have done that on day one. You know. Mm-hmm. Anyway, but I guess on the other hand,
day one he was like,
well, he was already loaded, so.
Yeah, I guess so.
But
I don't think he knew. Like, I mean, he was just fucking around with his friends.
Day one
green
was in
room,
his house originally. Yeah, he used to have guests over to his house, and he's like, that kind of got awkward after a while. You know? Yeah. So, but you know, on the other hand, he's a smart guy financially. He's not gonna like just because he's having fun podcasting, just gonna build a giant compound, you know, right away. But I think at this point, he probably makes enough revenue from it that like it doesn't even put a dent in the income stream from that podcast.
And then, you know, he has other jobs too.
Yeah. Can you imagine what he makes on one of his dumb advertisements that he does?
Just one advertisement or one episode?
One advertisement on one episode. It's probably, I mean, it's got to be a lot. I don't want to start guessing, but I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if monthly he makes, you know, $500,000 sometimes just on ad revenue.
Yeah.
So we should get into ads. We should get into that.
I thought you were going to say we should get into podcasting.
No, just the ad part. We should start selling ads.
Ourselves.
We can just lie to people and just claim, you know, we have like
more than 5 listeners.
Whatever, however many Joe Rogan has, we have more.
Yeah.
We have more than that. We have that plus 10% of that, and then, you know, that way we'll dominate the landscape. Then we can use the ad revenue to buy advertising for the show, and then we won't be lying because people will know about the show.
We're going to buy advertising for... I don't understand.
Think about it. Yeah. Fighting the system, subverting from within.
All right.
We'll take money from advertisers, and then we'll put out ads using that money for our show on other shows. We'll just take over the whole landscape, baby. It's brilliant. This is why I'm a business mind or something. Something like that.
Anywho.
So we got this pandemic that's still going on. That's cool.
You have anything to say about that?
A bit. You know, well, one, for those listening from the future, it is May 10th, I believe, 2020. This year is going by disturbingly fast. And so right now I think people are starting to look towards reopening the states. And that means there will be a big spike in the spread of the virus, of course.
So are they just planning on just opening it? Or are they doing this in stages?
Well, here's the thing. The Trump administration has explicitly abdicated all responsibility for guidance on this. There's a whistleblower case that just came out, and lots of complaints overall, basically putting forth a pretty solid case that Trump and his cronies are making a concerted effort to suppress official health administration advice about how to do reopening. They're just saying, just go for it. Just figure it out. States. You know, to some extent, it's a states' rights thing, and to another extent, I think it's just laziness and fear of getting it wrong. So they're just putting it all on states to figure out. The irony is that a couple of states have actually formed independent coalitions. So, like over in the West Coast where we are, I think Oregon, Washington, and maybe California or someone has gotten together and decided that they're doing their own thing based on wide-scale testing and data and science and analytics, which is, you know, what you'd expect.
Right.
And someone on the East Coast, I think, did the same thing. There's like 2 major coalitions that Trump has called mutineers.
What?
He said they're mutineers.
What does that mean?
That it's a mutiny. Oh. And that he has total authority, in quotes. I heard he walked that back later. But, you know, really, when I was speculating about the beginning of a second civil war, that's the kind of stuff I was thinking about, you know? He's straight up calling groups of independent states who are publicly operating against his advice. He's calling them mutineers and claiming absolute authority over them. And meanwhile, encouraging armed protesters to storm Capitol buildings to protect the economy. It's not good.
No.
It's not good. Anyway, what were you going to say?
Oh, I heard that us here on the West Coast, we all, like, Oregon, Washington, California made a pact that whatever we do, we're all going to do the same thing.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And then somebody on the East Coast or somewhere did the same thing. A few other states got together. We're mutineers, apparently.
What does mutineer mean?
Do you know what a mutiny is? It's like on a boat when the crew turns against the captain and takes over the ship.
That's what I thought.
It's treason, basically.
Okay.
Which is silly. Anyway, so that's something. And, you know, it also speaks to... When I made those predictions a few weeks back, one of them was the possibility of a shift towards a technocratic government that's focused more on data and science and expertise, you know? And that's what these groups are doing. These states that are uniting in independent coalitions, which is interesting. And hopefully that spreads on a national scale. It doesn't become a civil war, you know. But I don't know. Hard to say. I haven't heard many updates recently on the food supply, but last I heard it was breaking down. Mostly meat suppliers are the ones raising the biggest stink at the moment. But all across the board, food is going to waste because it can't be processed because plants are closed. And this raises questions about momentum and how things will resume again once they can.
So this brings up a listener question we got, which is, would you allow for some kind of like tracking device on your person if it meant opening up the economy earlier?
No. But on the other hand, I have one. It's called an iPhone.
Yeah, I was going to say, we're all being tracked anyways.
But I think the question that is being surfaced now is about the extent of tracking. Like in India, there's some people who are very concerned about what's going on there, because they're collecting and centralizing data on who people are interacting with, and that's not.
Well, I mean, that's the whole idea behind tracing. You want to know who you've been in contact with.
Yeah, and it's concerning, of course. And I kind of see both sides of it, because, like, on the one hand, I could imagine if we lived in a genuine utopia society where there was no concern about government control and evildoers doing evil, then it wouldn't be so bad. It would be great. We could squash a pandemic in like a couple days, you know. But we don't live in that utopia. We live in a horrifying hellscape that's worse by the day.
A little dramatic.
Yeah, well, you know, and when I say it's worse by the day, I don't mean like quality of life is necessarily worse by the day, but I recently started paying attention to the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, which is a group and a publication that's, I think it's a nonprofit that was founded by, I believe, Einstein and Oppenheimer, if I'm not mistaken, after they developed the atom bomb. And the goal was to get together and consult and advise the world on how close we are to nuclear holocaust each year, maybe twice a year or something. And we're closer than we've ever been, including since the Cold War. We're currently closest to the end of the world, according to the bulletin. They've switched to seconds from minutes on their clock. They have a clock, a symbolic clock, where they move the hand either forward or backward, depending on how society is doing overall. And given things like the spread of misinformation due to disruptive technologies that enable false news, that combined with deregulation and a lack of cooperation between international states, thanks largely to people like Trump, they consider the risk now greater than it's ever been. So that's the kind of thing I'm thinking about when I say a hellscape that's worse by the day. So we'll see how that shakes out. Right? You know, because during the Cold War, people used to drill for a nuclear war. Like, it was just a normal thing. You just hide under your desk at school and the air raid sirens go off and you just prepare to be annihilated. We don't do that now.
No.
But apparently,
in our childhood, we prepare for school shooters.
Right. Yeah. But apparently now it's actually much more likely that we may be wiped out by bombs. It's terrific.
Yay.
Yeah, things are rocky.
I was listening to Elon Musk on Joe Rogan about halfway through the episode. He was just on again. And he seems to think, I mean, not that he's like a virologist or, you know, he's a smart guy, but he's not necessarily an expert on this. He thinks it's overblown, and he thinks people should be able to go out if they want to and stay in if they want to type thing. He's of that. And I've kind of noticed a lot of really smart people seem to think that. Naval seems to be of that opinion.
Really?
Yeah, that the whole thing is overblown. It's not as deadly or dangerous in general as we once thought it was. And that the economic impact is going to be more detrimental than the virus itself.
You know, from the beginning, I've speculated that the economic impact might be more deadly, even if it is as bad as we think, because you know, things like nuclear war. But I think, yeah, I haven't heard Naval talk on this. When I heard Musk talk about it, he didn't really. other than his point that having clear and clearly defined data and metrics, that's important. I would agree with that. At the very least, they should be standardized so that people know what they're talking about when they compare numbers.
Right.
Even if the numbers are not strictly accurate, at least there's a apples to apples comparison, so you can trend data that way. That I agree, that's important. And maybe it's not as deadly as suspected, but I think it's the kind of thing that's going to take a long time to figure out how deadly it is.
Absolutely. Like, we don't know because of there's a lack of testing. I was actually I was watching a little Twitter feud between Tim Pool and Dave Pacman. And so apparently the U.S. Makes up 4% of the world's population, but we have 32% of COVID cases. But as someone else pointed out, we're also testing more, that we have more tests than anyone else in the world. But we're actually number 41. We're 41st in terms of tests per capita.
Wow.
So I was like trying to wrap my head around what that means, because David Pacman was interpreting that as, because we're 41st, that those aren't good numbers. Like, obviously we're doing really bad. Like, the disease is spreading too much. And then Tim Pool was saying, like, no, because overall we just have more tests, and so more people are testing positive because we have more tests.
It sounds like, just from what you just said, it sounds like Pacman was right. If we're 41st in terms of tests per capita,
right,
then comparing just the raw numbers of cases is meaningless without norming it against the availability of tests per capita.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, people, it's weird seeing it.
But then also, if you're looking at data, like you're looking at graphs or something that shows just like who has the most positive tests, then of course America would be more than other countries, because this is where I got like hung up on it. I was like, oh, this is too mathy for me. So that would make sense that it would show us having more people that are positive, right?
If what?
If we have more tests in general.
Yeah,
right?
like,
we were number one in terms of like testing people, but 41st in terms of testing people per capita.
Yeah, if we were, and if the number of cases per capita were also what we were looking at, and if there was universal availability of tests and reliability of tests and sensitivity of tests, then that would be a pretty good indicator. But I mean, at this point, seeing what figures are making headlines, it just really highlights data illiteracy overall.
Yeah,
because you'd see things about like people making a big deal about, for instance, like when the United States had more cases than anyone else, and that's a meaningless metric. I mean, at the very least, you would need to look at the populations of everyone else to determine roughly on the scale where we are. And then beyond that, you'd have to talk about availability of tests, geographic dispersion, when shutdowns occurred, where things are being reported versus not reported.
And how they're reporting it. Another thing that Elon Musk and like other people I've heard mention, and I'm not sure how true this is like people will be dying for reasons other than COVID, but because they have COVID in their system, then they get reported as dying of COVID. Yeah,
I'm sure that's happening. I have no idea, and I don't think anyone reasonably can say at this point how common that is, and to what extent. I mean, he was saying like if somebody gets hit by a bus while they have COVID, they'll be diagnosed as a COVID death. I think that's going to be a pretty rare occurrence if that happens. It's possible, but one thing that I've seen some people talk about is that in the short term, what we can do to avoid some of these ambiguities is look at the actual total number of deaths and compare that against seasonal and trend data and historical data and see if there's an anomaly in the overall figures. And apparently there is. It's a significant figure.
In the U.S.?
Yeah. And that's still not enough to draw conclusions, because it could be increased stress is causing increased heart attacks and strokes. Decreased employment is causing increased substance abuse, suicide, murder. There's all kinds of things that could be spiking due to the pandemic that aren't actually COVID. I've
also heard like people are too scared to go to the hospital, so they might really need to. They might need to go to the hospital, and then they're not, and then they.
On the other hand, I think physician-caused deaths are the number 3 cause of death in the States, if I'm not mistaken. Jesus. So maybe more people are surviving the hospital by not going.
That's dark.
Yeah, that's a whole other. I mean, that's like the questions this raises about the whole healthcare system overall, well, it doesn't even raise those questions. They're just so endemic and built in that I think they're just being missed just as much as they always have been. But yeah, I mean, I just read a couple years ago that like I think 20% of diagnoses are wrong.
Wow, 20%?
Yeah. When I told my doctor that, he was surprised it wasn't higher. Yeah. Yeah. So that's not reassuring.
Well, so you get a second opinion, I guess.
Right. Yeah. And so that's horrifying. And then yeah, I mean, iatrogenic, I think it's called when a treatment kills a patient. I think it's anyway. It's I think last time I checked, it was the number 3rd cause after like heart failure, and I can't remember what number 2 was, but I think heart failure is number 1, and then I don't know, maybe cancer or car wrecks or some shit. I have no idea, but yeah, your doctor killing you is pretty high on the list. Anyway,
is that do you think that's unique to America, or do you think that's true elsewhere?
No, it's probably true elsewhere. Yeah, I think it's certainly not like I wouldn't expect it to be exactly the same, but it's probably other places as well. Because I mean, the medical model is one approach to health that focuses on the treatment of symptomology using exogenous means like surgery or medicine, and there is an increased awareness of things like functional medicine and preventive healthcare, and that's good. Mm-hmm. And I think that the convergence there is partly informed by the fact that insurance companies are realizing they can save a lot of money that way, and it's hopeful that things like that can happen where, you know, we as a people can benefit by getting better healthcare, and insurance companies can benefit by making more money. I would prefer they don't make quite so much money, frankly, but at least those two things go together. So it's a positive trend. But overall, yeah, I think just the system with humans being as flawed as we are and having as little information as we have about biology, it's probably super common for misdiagnoses to occur or for the correct diagnosis with the wrong treatment. I mean, it's all the time. There's just treatments overturned that. I remember about 20 years ago, I heard about I think it was the most common knee surgery for ACL repair or something like that. They finally did a wide-reaching placebo trial of it where they compared it with cases where they just cut somebody's knee open and sewed it back up without actually doing anything. And they had, I believe, approximately equal results.
That sounds unethical.
Oh, I mean, if people volunteered for the study, then that's how placebo studies work.
I mean, but to cut someone open.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in this case,
unethical?
if no, I don't think so. Especially if what you learn from it is that the surgery you thought you were doing to save people wasn't doing shit.
Well, we learned a lot from Nazi experiments too. It doesn't mean they were ethical.
Fair point. Yeah. But I mean, I think the key differentiating factor there is that one is voluntary.
Sure, but what if someone was voluntarily agreed to have their dick cut off? Doesn't mean you should do it.
Hey, for science. You know? No, there's I don't know the rubric that they use for judging these sorts of things, but if there were a valid medical reason for cutting someone's dick off and they wanted that to happen, I'm sure ostensibly there's no reason to object just on the basis that it sounds grotesque, because surgery it's gross.
Well, okay, yeah, not that, but I just think unnecessary surgery.
Right, like but this is people who had knee problems, so it's not unnecessary.
Oh, the person had a knee problem?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, they took...
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, it was like I think it was either the most common knee surgery or the most common knee problem, like the most common surgery for the most common knee problem, I believe is what it was. I don't remember what the actual problem was, but... Yeah, I mean, but the fact that this was the gold standard treatment and cost tens of thousands of dollars to do and was done daily many times to many people, and it took them to that study to realize it wasn't doing anything, you know, like that. This is modern medicine. Granted, it was 20 years ago, but it's the same shit.
Yeah.
It's the same shit we're doing overall. And it's not like it's equivalent with all procedures. That's certainly not what I mean to imply, or even between all fields. I mean, things like trauma surgery and emergency medicine, by and large, you can expect are probably doing good, evidence-based. You know, they're saving lives, and something like massive bleeding, you know, stopping that is objectively the right way to go. But then other stuff, it's not so objective. Elective surgeries and medications and such, it's just not clear what's helping and what's hurting. AI is getting better, though.
Yeah?
Yeah, AI is actually outperforming radiologists, probably other doctors as well.
Yeah, that's Andrew Yang's fear.
Yeah, radiology is probably the most vulnerable.
Yeah.
Partly because, I mean, they were already vulnerable to outsourcing. There's a lot of highly trained radiologists who earn, depending on their subspecialty, usually between $250,000 to $450,000 a year, doing highly specialized work. But then it turns out, because they're not actually seeing patients directly, that work can be sent through email overseas to somebody just as qualified in another country, making a fraction of the salary. So radiologists are already getting
You get a culture
screwed.
like India where they're always pushing their kids to be doctors
Yeah.
or I don't know about lawyers, doctors usually.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it makes sense. And they'll do it for a lot less cash.
Yep. Because, I mean, a tenth of that is still a huge amount of money in India.
And now you have robots doing it better than either of them for nothing other than the cost of developing the software and running it, which is like a staff. And then the scale question. I mean, that's where automation becomes really risky and disruptive on an economic level, because if you have one program that's really good at detecting, brain aneurysms on an MRI, to scale that is virtually free. So now you can just cover everybody with it. Whereas to scale doctors, you have to train doctors. It's a long, arduous process. It's very expensive to hire and train. It takes just radiology is a 5-year program after med school, which is 4 years, after college, which is 4 years. So just that pipeline by itself is outrageously expensive. But when software will do it for free, and you can double, triple, quadruple it instantaneously, you can see a whole field being not wiped out, but pretty well handicapped pretty quickly.
What do you think about Neuralink?
I don't know much about it. I heard Musk saying they're going to put electrodes in people's brains to fix brain problems.
Yeah, drill a hole in there and put it in.
Yeah.
Sounds pretty scary.
Sure. Yeah. I think in the long run, it's probably a good thing. I mean,
it's probably inevitable.
Yeah. And I mean, imagining all the good it can do, hard to imagine the bad it can do. Because
it just sounds like a Black Mirror episode.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. It could be,
I mean, we're already living in one, so. Yeah.
Any disruptive technology can end up being I usually just default to like the end of the world as like that's the worst. By definition, that's the worst it could get, or the end of the entire universe, I guess.
Wow.
Which is feasible, It's
so dramatic.
Yeah, well, because I mean, if anything could cause the end of the universe, it would be AI. I think AI is I think is the biggest risk to everything. But anyway, yeah, Neuralink. Yeah, he was talking about things like you could use it to treat epilepsy in real time, prevent seizures. You could restore senses that had been lost, like vision and hearing and such.
He was talking about mind reading and shit too, like being able to communicate without talking.
Yeah, I mean, we've already made significant strides toward that. There's software that can reconstruct a picture you're thinking about based on your brainwaves.
I've seen that. It's fucking wild.
I mean, that's mind reading, to some extent. And then you have implants controlled by thought, for amputees. You can install limbs that they can move and articulate by thinking, not by actually contracting muscles, because they don't have those muscles.
Right.
So,
yeah, that's so wild. Like I was just thinking the other day, this is kind of a high thought. I can't remember if I was high or not, but like I was just like looking at my hand and then I was like focusing on my hand and then focusing on the background of my hand and then going back and forth. And I was just thinking about how I don't know what I'm doing, but I could just do it,
Oh, like blurring your eyes?
Yeah, or blurring them or just, shifting focus like that. It's
saw somebody on Twitter was doing a poll about that recently where they were trying to figure out if other people could do that. And apparently, I don't know if we're talking about the same thing, but are you able to like look at something and then make it go in and out of focus?
Sure.
without moving your eyes.
Without moving. Well, I don't know. You told me.
Oh, your eyes are moving. Yeah,
Oh.
you're just looking between the foreground and background.
Oh.
But that's
Is that all that is? When I blur my eyes, it's going foreground and background.
Well, that's what you're doing. Well, now you're not doing it.
Wait, hold on. Yeah, I think I'm just doing foreground and background.
Your eyes are slightly crossing. Too.
Okay.
Yeah. But you can also just actually I might be doing that too. It's hard to tell. Anyway, it is possible apparently for some people to stare at something and without moving their eyes, they can just make it go in and out of focus. It has something to do with ocular muscular control. I don't have any idea how it works. But apparently it's a minority of people that can do that, and it's weird because like you don't think of whatever muscles in and around the eyes you have as being necessarily voluntary, other than like you can look in different directions, that's voluntary and blink and stuff. But you don't think of like the actual vision elements being under voluntary control, but to some extent they are. And that's weird.
It is weird.
It's a high thought. Yeah, I used to do this thing when I was a kid where I would stare at my hand and just move like a finger slightly, and I would just focus on the idea that feels like something I'm doing in and with my hand, but in reality, it's my mind doing it in my brain, and that would it would give me this weird dissociative, trippy state that would only last for like a few seconds, where everything would get like super surreal and bizarre, and then I would just snap back to reality after a few seconds, about 5
I
seconds.
don't understand. What did it feel like? Or what were you doing?
Well, I would stare at my hand and think about how the fact that moving a finger is something that I take for granted as occurring in my hand, but it's really the union of my mind and body that's happening, and that's happening in my mind.
So you just think about that for a while? And,
yeah.
Oh, okay.
And then I would have this weird like, whoa, and it would just like hit, and it would last like 5 seconds, and then it would just go away, and I would want it back because it was like that was probably my first pseudo intoxication experience, because it was like kids will like spin around in circles, and some people draw that correlation to the urge to get drunk, just like modifying your state of mind by modifying your body in different ways, changing your state. That was one for me that always just really was appealing and difficult to achieve. It required like intense concentration. I probably only did it half a dozen times. I would do another one where I'd lie on the back. I'll lie on my back on the couch with my head like off the couch, looking at the ceiling, and focus until I could believe that the ceiling was the floor, and then I would feel like I was going to fall into the ceiling.
Whoa.
And I would like jump. Yeah, it's really weird. It's a weird kid, weird adult, really.
Yeah.
Anyway.
What
were we talking about? Robots?
Neuralink.
Yeah, Neuralink. So, YOLO. Let's do it.
You want to be the first one?
Nope.
I don't think anyone wants to be the first one. How do you test? Like, do you do prisoners or something?
Yeah, prisoners. Yeah. No, you can't operate on prisoners.
Well, who's going to be the
their
first?
Will,
well, what if they volunteer?
If they volunteer, I don't think prisoners would be. I think it would just be based on ideal patients who have the right access and can consent in the best way. Prisoners, the issue there is that prisoner medical.
It's a poor guy that just shoplifted. It's like succumbed to some fucking.
No, prisoners I don't think would be a good population because of funding. Because prisoners don't have access to good medical facilities and funding the way that people with private insurance or wealthy people do. Prisons are just trying to keep patients from dying, basically, and not always even that much.
Well, what if it's some guy on death row that's going to die anyways?
Well, no, because, who's going to pay for it is the thing.
Well, the people that are doing the Neuralink, they're trying to experiment on it.
Oh, yeah. I don't really know how that kind of research works, but I would guess that it's probably, a lot of treatments are quasi experimental anyway. So if it can be covered by insurance, then that would probably be the most likely approach to standardizing the procedures and techniques through like just normal patients. But I guess maybe it was something super experimental like that. Maybe not. Maybe insurance wouldn't cover it.
I wasn't advocating for that, by the way, in case people thought I was. Okay. I was just wondering out loud.
Yeah.
As I do.
We got to do something about this prison system. It's a bad system. I heard like over 2 months ago, I believe California had already started releasing low-level drug offenders in preparation for the pandemic, which I was really surprised and pleased with that, because they should release them anyway.
Right.
But the fact that they were so quick to just start just letting people go, because they
it tells you that they should have been there in the first place.
Yeah. And then there was some controversy because apparently they've also released some convicted sex offenders, like some pretty heinous cases, to make room for. The story was to make room for the people they're arresting who are going to the beach when they should be social distancing. Mm-hmm. It's probably a tenuous link there, maybe not though. But either way, like this can definitely go wrong. You don't necessarily want to release everybody,
right?
But yeah, it's a shit situation with prisons and prison labor. Like I remember a couple months ago hearing that, I think it was Alcatraz. No, Alcatraz is shut down. Some major prison in New York, they were paying inmates, I think, $6 an hour to dig mass graves in preparation for the pandemic. And $6 an hour, I think, unless things have changed, is excellent pay for a prison worker, because they usually make sense to do hard labor.
Slave labor.
Yeah, it's not cool. That's not cool.
But okay, let me think this. So, all right, we're all supposed to be social distancing. We're all supposed to be in our house, not leaving our house. So does it make sense that they would release prisoners who are staying in one place?
Well, yeah, because they're concentrated in the prison where they can't social distance.
Oh, okay.
So anything that gets in
per
there,
cell, there's like more than one person.
Yeah, and just, I mean, when they're doing work, when they're eating in the cafeteria, when they're in the bathrooms, like they're very close proximity.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So they're trying to free up space, basically.
Trying to free up space. So, like, you're out of prison, but go stay in your home.
Right. Yeah. House arrest.
That you don't have because you've been in prison forever.
Yeah. I heard somewhere, I didn't go deep into the analysis, but somebody was making the case that the modern prison system is just it's like slavery 2.0. Like, it was just shifting the institution from literal open public slavery to just like hidden for-profit prison labor that gets paid practically nothing.
Yeah.
It's pretty similar. And the affected people are pretty similar. It's generally the poor and the minorities in the States, at least.
Oh, yeah. It's slave labor. That and college athletes.
Yeah, it's a little different.
It is a little different, but it's still the same in that, like...
They get taken advantage of.
Absolutely, yeah. Huge.
Yeah, for
like,
sure.
Everyone else makes money off of that, except the people that they need to make the money.
Yeah, it's fucked up.
Yeah.
And they're wrecking their bodies, and the opportunity costs of being that good at sports is major. I mean, think of how much they practice, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I've never
most
practiced
of
for
them
anything
aren't
that much.
going to make a serious living out of it. Or if they do, it's going to be short-lived.
Yeah, then they'll be screwed and sore and skilled, but, you know, it's not much of an income. The for-profit prisons are probably the place to start with prison reform. I mean, other than legalizing drugs or decriminalizing, I forget all the minutia. But for-profit prisons, I mean, that's just a fucked notion. You know, they're incentivized to keep people in prison, get as many prisoners as they can, because they make money by housing people, and they make money from the state. Their contracts with governments to imprison people. It's incentivizing lockups of people for nonsense. It's directly antithetical to the whole notion of not locking people up for minor offenses that arguably aren't offenses, like smoking weed. That's not an offense.
No. And
in my humble opinion, I think anyone who would imprison someone for doing it should be imprisoned. Imprisoning someone is such a greater crime than smoking weed. Absolutely. I mean, imagine that. You're abducting somebody and locking them up in a cell because they smoked a plant. Yeah. That's a crime. Mm-hmm. I mean, that...
Yeah, we really take for granted, like, what jail is and what it, like, how our society is run. And granted, I think we should have police. I think we should have jails.
Definitely.
But, like, make no mistake about it, you are forcing someone in a cage with a threat of violence, you know?
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah, it's serious shit. We just kind of take it for granted because it's this long...
It's within our civilized society.
Right. But it's really fucked. It's, and again, not prison, but the way it's used, you know, the way it's abused like this. And to some extent, any major cultural institution is going to be misused, but we can really do a lot better about it.
Yeah. I mean, are there other countries that have for-profit prisons?
Probably. And I mean, there's other countries that have much worse prisons, too.
Oh, yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
I heard about, I think it was in Brazil a few years ago, there was like a prison riot that resulted in, I think, like 64 deaths and like 15 beheadings, and like it got crazy. Yeah. And that kind of thing just happens other places. I saw this one prison, I think it was in El Salvador. It was an MS-13 prison where 100% of the inmates were MS-13 because they couldn't mix gangs because they would just immediately kill each other.
Right.
So they would put them in, and then all the guards were on the outside of the prison. They had no staff inside the prison. They were just making sure nobody got out, and then the prisoners ran the whole thing.
Wow. Yeah. El Salvador is the murder capital.
Wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
And it's where MS-13...
I was there for a bit.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, sorry, Mom and Dad, I'm in the murder capital of the world. They're always like, as I travel so much, they're always like, where are you going now?
The murder capital.
But the thing about it is, it's gang violence. I don't have much to worry about as a tourist.
Yeah. For the most part, as long as you're not really stupid about it, or just unlucky, you know.
Sure. I mean, yeah, and anything can happen, but like, yeah, I'm not going to the wrong parts of the world.
Yeah.
Picking fights with gang members.
You know what's funny is MS-13 is an El Salvadoran gang, and that's how they're known and how they're considered. But the interesting thing is that they formed in American prisons. El Salvadorans who were imprisoned in America formed MS-13 in America. So it's really an American gang that was then exported back to El Salvador when people were let out and deported.
Jesus.
Yeah. America's really good at creating gangs. We're so good at doing violence.
We're number one.
Yeah. Yeah, number one.
Woo! America. Oh, man. Yeah. Speaking of traveling, I put a bunch of money into Delta stock recently.
The same day that Warren Buffett sold 100% of his airline stock.
All billions of dollars worth of stock at a loss. Warren Buffett, the guy that's known for, I think he's known for saying that you should be greedy when everyone else is scared, and he's known for keeping his stocks for decades and decades. So I'm like, shit. Because my thought was like, it's dropped so low. As a contrarian buy, it's dropped so low, and I'm like, surely they're too big to fail.
Well, I mean, it's possible that this will work out to be a wise decision, because his thing was his investment firm manages funds for other people, and there's always a slightly different motivation there versus investing strictly for profit as a contrarian. Because if he's looking at mid to long-term gains, there might not be a good indication that this is a portfolio move that's going to, like, keeping that stock is actually going to be healthy in the long term when we look at like 20 or 30 years or something. But on the other hand, it could be that they experience at least enough of a resurgence within the next year or 2 or 5 or 10 that you could still profit by just selling the stock rather than holding it long term. Mm-hmm. So, it might work out or not. You might have just lost a bunch of money.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, apparently it took Buffett's firm, Berkshire Hathaway, until I think 2016 or something to even start buying airline stock, because they just considered the industry too unstable and unpredictable in the long term.
Sorry, who is this?
Berkshire Hathaway, Buffett's firm.
Oh, right.
And then they're just like, we were right, should not have bought.
Yeah, he has a history of like not really trusting the airline industry, and I was reading a little bit about that. So, I don't know, I'm just diversifying my portfolio.
Yeah.
He also recommends like ETFs. ETFs are so boring.
What's that?
Index funds.
Yes.
They're safe, but they're just they're very low risk, but they're just
low
like
yield.
Yeah, low yield, very low yield. But I was thinking like, I mean, I have some money just sitting in savings that I'm not going to touch anyways. That might as well go into that. You know?
As long as you have a diversified portfolio with significant hard assets and liquid capital or access to liquid through things like real estate sales and other stuff. I mean, personally, like for this whole pandemic, I've been skirting this line between like thinking strategically ahead of time about how to avoid the major problems versus, on the other hand, being a fearmonger and overreacting. Things like bank runs you have to think about. I mean, there were some bank runs. Apparently, they must have stopped, or they're just not getting good press coverage, because I haven't seen a lot about that lately. But I mean, having all your cash tied up in stocks is for situations like this, it's horrifying. It's a big mistake. But the same thing would go if you had all your cash in only real estate or only in cash or gold buried in the backyard or something, you know. The diversity is key. Of course, for people like me who aren't even at a scale where having a diversified portfolio has any tangible, meaningful results, this is a moot point. But you know, the greater the portfolio, the greater your odds of losing it if it's all in one place. Yeah. My portfolio is small enough that it'd be hard to lose.
You already lost it. Yeah, it seems like from what I've been reading, it's health and tech stocks are the ones that will do the best right now.
Yeah, sure.
My Amazon and Microsoft are doing well, and my Abbott.
Yeah, what's Abbott?
Abbott, that's my favorite stock. So I'm not super knowledgeable when it comes to like finances and investing. Like I try to be smart about it, but I only know so much. But anyways, a friend of mine who's really good with stocks taught me like how to actually pick stocks. I've pretty much forgotten everything he's told me, but at the time, but I was like at my peak at understanding, I picked out Abbott, which is a pharmaceutical company who I haven't checked up on this recently, but a couple weeks ago they were coming out with, or they're inventing a 5-minute test for
Abbott
COVID.
Labs. That's the
Abbott
one
Labs.
the White House uses.
Yeah. And I bought them when they were like $40 a share, and then like it's gone up to like 70, and then since COVID it's gone up to 90. So
nice.
Yeah,
that's the lab. That's the test that the White House is using for their regular staff testing. And incidentally, it just turns out in the last week, at least 2 White House staffers have been diagnosed with the virus. And it's interesting too, because like I hadn't even thought about like how insulated the White House is or is not, but. And it also highlights the fact that people are calming down a lot about the spread of the virus, but they're not fully considering things like the geographic distribution and population densities and infrastructure structures throughout the country. Because at this point, what we're seeing is the virus is now spreading to more and more rural areas, and rural communities are in large part the backbone of American economy, and things like agriculture and meat production. But anyway, so it's just reached the White House. And I mean, the White House, you would imagine, gets a lot of traffic internationally, or has people in and out who interact with a lot of international travelers. And like it's just now getting to the point where Fauci just put himself in quarantine because he came into contact with one of the aides who has coronavirus. This just happened like 2 days ago. We're like months into this thing. So, you know, what happens next is hard to say. Meanwhile, you have Trump not using masks at public events. Like he did a thing where he went and I think he gave a talk to like World War II vets or something without a mask on. And like those people are old, you know, like that's a population you have to watch out for.
Right.
You had Pence touring, I think it was Mayo Clinic.
Hospitals, yeah.
Yeah, the Mayo Clinic. He was literally the only person not wearing a face mask.
Did you hear his
while
reason
talking
for that?
to patients? Yeah, he wanted to look them in the eye. Yeah, if he's wearing his face mask over his eyes, then I could see why that could be a bit of a problem. But I mean, you got the two most visible figures in the administration, other than maybe Fauci. You have Trump and Pence, neither of whom were wearing masks, and both of whom are now have been exposed to staffers who have the virus, and then meanwhile they're communicating with people out in public, doing events where they're not wearing masks, which means they're also potential carriers because the tests aren't 100% accurate, and you can spread the disease before you show signs or before you test positive. So it's a shit state of affairs, and it's another way that they're just an absolutely abhorrent example for the rest of us about how to conduct yourself.
I mean, have you seen any picture of Trump wearing a mask?
Not a one. I saw a picture of him wearing plastic goggles. I don't know if that was even a new picture or an old one, but that, you know, he had eye protection. So if he's going to saw some wood, I guess he's doing all right. But no, I haven't. Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah.
And you want to talk about Plandemic?
Oh yeah, the documentary.
Yeah. So there's this quote unquote documentary going around.
It's an interview.
Yeah. So okay. We saw one that was 25 minutes, and then you said that was part 1. So does that mean there's more?
Yeah.
Or
so apparently it's a full length featured documentary that they're working on.
Okay.
And I think they just released part 1.
So what everyone's talking about is that 25-minute segment.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure. Like, because the thing is, like, I'm hearing people talking about it. It's a real testament to, like, the fact that I live in such a liberal bubble, because I'm hearing all my friends complaining about people sharing this documentary, but no one saying, hey, check out this documentary.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like, oh, God, all my friends are liberals.
I've seen some friends recommending the documentary on my socials.
So it was kind of funny because I was like, well, what is this documentary? And I go and I'm like searching it on YouTube and all the links are taken down. So it kind of came to this like Streisand effect where I was like, I want to fucking see this. And like I couldn't find it. But you found it. Yeah. And I kind of watched in and out. It was a little boring, but it was like an interview with this woman. And
yeah, the woman, and I don't know her full background. I can't remember or even her name, but something with M.
Michelle something?
No, I think it was Pam Myotic or something.
That's not a name.
Might as well be.
Okay.
I mean, you know. Anyway, if Kim.com can be a name, then...
That's a name? Whose name is that?
Yeah, that was a guy that he sold his name for advertising. Anyway, I think he went to prison later for BitTorrent piracy or something. Anyway, back to the point. Yeah, I watched it. It was... My general sense of it was that it was a hack job from editing to content. There was nothing compelling to me in it. There might have been one or two things worth following up on, but in the smear of the 25-minute interview, it didn't. There wasn't really anything. There was no smoking gun. There was no especially insightful logic or information.
So what's her general claim? Like, what's she trying to say?
That's part of the reason this is such a hack job is that like the editing makes it kind of unclear what some of her claims are. Like she would say one thing and then they would ask questions about something that she really didn't say anything about, and then she would answer them in a way that wasn't directly tied to what she was talking about. But I think by and large so one part of what she said that seemed to be the core of it and maybe very valid was that I think she said in the 70s or 80s there was an act passed that allowed people to patent discoveries, things like genes or medications that they had developed or discovered while using publicly funded research grants. Mm-hmm. And that created a conflict of interest that led to this bubble of private industry and private universities profiting from work that they're doing with public tax dollars while keeping it a secret and owning the rights to it so they can get royalties. And that this is creating a situation where medications are not available to the people they should be. Innovation is not as open because as soon as something's discovered that's significant, it's patented. So then riffing on that becomes more difficult. And it's secret anyway, so a lot of people don't even know what was discovered. And if that's true, then that's serious, and that should be addressed. And it sounded like that part at least is true. But beyond that, she accused Fauci and other high-ranking health officials of conspiracy to smear her. They had her arrested for theft, and according to her, planted a notebook from the office she was working in just to have her, not even officially charged. She said she was put on a 5-year gag order, but not charged with anything. And her gag order is up, so she's writing this book and doing this interview. She's also made some claims that are kind of sketchy, like face masks are giving people coronavirus by reactivating the virus. But the thing is, like, I don't want to blame her too much for that kind of thing because all this was so poorly edited and so deliberately edited that it's not clear what exactly she was saying. Because, I mean, it is true that using a face mask incorrectly increases your exposure. Because if you have a face mask and you come into contact with somebody with the virus and then you continue wearing the face mask for too long or you take it off and put it back on again, the virus lives on the mask. Mm-hmm. So you could potentially reinfect yourself. But given this shady documentary and hack job editing around all this, I don't know how much she's actually claiming versus what they're just drumming up for publicity.
Okay, but in the name itself, Plandemic, is she saying that someone invented this virus and they have some ulterior motives?
So this is also a part that's nuanced, and in that little clip I watched, she didn't get into enough detail to convince me of her stance either way.
But what was her stance?
Well, that's the thing is they didn't suss it out completely. So she was saying essentially that this virus was not that it was created in a laboratory, but that it was the result of modifications made in a laboratory. So she worked on Ebola back in the day, and I think she said that Ebola was incapable of transmitting to humans before they had done their research on transmitting it to humans. I know with COVID, so one of the sources of conspiracy theories right now is the fact that Fauci was, as the head of the NIAID, the National Institute for Allergy and Infectious Disease, sent $3.7 million in funding to the Wuhan laboratory that's like 900 yards from the wet market where this thing broke out, and that the research was specifically focused on what's called gain-of-function testing, which takes, in this case, a bat coronavirus with the goal of making it transmissible to humans, ostensibly so that they could study how to treat it once it transmits to humans and treat things like pandemics. There are those who say, well, this is clearly a weaponization program. It's just biological weapons that they're developing. It's hard to say whether that's deliberate or not, but it's the same thing. Whatever your goal is, that's the same work you're doing is gain-of-function testing.
I see.
And I think she was just making the point that for this to have happened naturally would have taken, I think she said like hundreds of years or something. And given the rapidity with which it achieved this ability to transmit from animals to humans and from humans to humans, that it had to have been the result of engineering for gain-of-function testing. Which I don't know. I'm not convinced either way. I'm leaning towards that this was probably accidentally released from the Wuhan laboratory, though. And I mean, this is research that Obama had shut down during his administration, because Fauci was in place then as well. And Obama, I think, shut it down either because it was weaponization or because it was just too dangerous. I mean, there were hundreds of international scientists protesting the research on the basis that it will lead to an accidental pandemic, if not a deliberate pandemic. And that's why it was shut down. And then it restarted under Trump 2 years ago. And then last year, we started seeing reports from our intelligence and military sources saying that we need to be very concerned about the risk of an upper respiratory flu-like coronavirus pandemic, and that we're not prepared for it. That was late 2019. And here we are.
Well, late 2019, that was already happening in China, right? I mean,
yeah, well, so there's some reports that say that the virus began in December. I think were the first documented cases. Some say it was earlier than that. And this was, so the military and intelligence were making these reports to the White House even before this particular outbreak. They were just saying we're not prepared for a pandemic in general, probably because of Trump doing things like disbanding the pandemic response team, which is a whole nother issue. But then they were specifically aware of the Wuhan virus and focusing on that one and warning about it, saying it could cause up to 500,000 American deaths, a report that Trump says he doesn't remember, which is interesting. Anyway, so a lot of this is, like, I think everything I just said is fact, other than the things that I'm obviously speculating about. And circumstantial evidence is certainly not enough to draw conclusions about a conspiracy or whatever, or even to say this is definitely a human augmented virus. But there's definitely enough there to continue researching and pursuing the topic.
Yeah.
It's definitely concerning. Yeah.
All right, should we wrap it up?
Yeah, let's do that. All right, thanks everyone for listening. Send us your coronavirus questions and any other questions at standardpodcast.com. And
Bye, guys.
Wash your hands.